Vecna talks too much for someone truly in control. Real power doesn't need to explain itself, right? That is exactly why fans started questioning Vecna's motivations the moment he started monologuing in Season 4. Every time he captures a victim in his mind lair, he talks explaining his philosophy, justifying his actions, revealing his childhood trauma like he's desperate for someone to understand him. For someone who claims to transcend humanity, he's weirdly committed to giving TED Talks. That's the behavior of someone trying to convince himself he's doing the right thing, which suggests doubt lurking underneath all that confidence. When Max was trapped in his vision, he explained why she deserved to die, why the world was broken, why he was the solution. Villains who genuinely believe they're right don't waste time justifying themselves to teenagers, they just act. But Vecna hesitates, talks, and gives his victims just enough time to be rescued by a Kate Bush song. That hesitation feels deliberate, like something deeper is forcing him to follow a script he didn't write. Fans noticed he's almost theatrical in how he presents himself, building elaborate death scenes instead of simply taking lives efficiently. But if Vecna's not fully in control, who's been pulling the strings all along? The Mind Flayer existed long before Vecna arrived. Season 4 showed Henry Creel arriving in the Upside Down after 11 banished him in 1979, and the dimension looked empty. Just red lightning, floating particles, an endless void. Then Henry supposedly shaped the Mind Flayer from that cosmic dust, giving it purposes and form, which is the upside-down equivalent of letting a toddler think they're steering the car. Except fans aren't buying that story completely, because the Mind Flayer feels ancient in ways that Henry Creel, even at his most powerful, can't replicate. It's described as a hive mind, something that thinks across dimensions and operates on timescales humans can't comprehend. That's not something a traumatized teenager creates in a few years. That's something that's existed for eons, waiting for the right moment to act. Even Hawkins can't produce that much supernatural talent overnight. What if Henry didn't create the Mind Flayer, but discovered it already there in the void, already conscious and already planning? What if his arrival was exactly what it had been waiting for, a human consciousness it could use as an interface with Earth? The particles Henry supposedly shaped might have been the Mind Flayer allowing itself to be shaped, giving Henry the illusion of control while it studied him, learned from him, and figured out how to use his trauma as a weapon. Season 2 showed the Mind Flayer as a massive shadow in the sky, moving with intention and intelligence that felt distinctly non-human. When it possessed Billy in Season 3, it didn't just control his body, it understood human society well enough to blend in, to manipulate, to plan complex operations involving multiple people. And if the Mind Flayer's been in control all along, that changes everything about Vecna's role. Vecna's powers only work on humans with trauma. Here's something fans notice that doesn't quite add up. Vecna exclusively targets teenagers with psychological wounds, and his curse only works if they're carrying guilt, shame, or unresolved pain. Chrissy had an eating disorder and an abusive mother. Fred carried guilt over a car accident. Patrick suffered abuse from his father. Max was drowning in grief and depression after Billy's loss. Every single victim fits that profile perfectly, which raises an obvious question: why? If Vecna's goal is simply opening gates to merge dimensions, wouldn't it be more efficient to target anyone? Why limit himself to emotionally damaged teenagers when there are millions of easier targets? The specificity suggests he's not choosing victims based on convenience, but based on necessity, like he can only access people whose psychological defenses are already compromised by trauma. That's a limitation, a weakness in his abilities that he's trying to work around. It's almost like Vecna needs the trauma to create a pathway into their minds, which means he's not as omnipotent as he appears. Real gods don't need their victims to be broken first. They usually handle the breaking themselves. Just ask anyone in Hawkins. They break them. But Vecna seems dependent on finding people who are already breaking, which suggests someone or something else set those rules for him, and he's just following the parameters he was given. Meanwhile, there's another detail about the Upside Down that doesn't match Vecna's supposed timeline. By the way, if you love Stranger Things, I'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe. It helps more than you know. The Upside Down was frozen on November 6th, 1983, years after Vecna arrived. Vecna entered the Upside Down in 1979 when 11 banished him during the Rainbow Room Massacre. But when Nancy discovers in Season 4 that the Upside Down is frozen in time, it's not locked on 1979. It's locked on November 6th, 1983, the exact day Will Byers disappeared and 11 opened the gate. That's a 4-year gap that doesn't make sense if Vecna's been in control the entire time. Why would the dimension freeze on that specific date if Vecna had been shaping it since 1979? The logical conclusion is that something about November 6th was more significant than Vecna's arrival, that the gate opening and Will's disappearance triggered something fundamental about how the Upside Down operates. Fans theorize the dimension might have frozen because Will's presence changed it somehow, because a human consciousness entering without being possessed or corrupted created a temporal anchor. Or maybe the gate itself caused the freeze, the connection between dimensions, locking both sides into that moment. Either way, it suggests Vecna doesn't have complete control over the Upside Down's fundamental nature. Hard to be the big bad when the dimension you command barely listens to you. He can reshape some things, influence creatures, open gates, but he can't change when the dimension itself is frozen, which implies something more powerful than him setting that rule. You can't be the ultimate villain if you're living in a world someone else programmed. But the most damning evidence might be in what Vecna wants versus what actually happens. Vecna claims he wants to reshape the world, but he keeps making choices that sabotage that goal. Think about his actual strategy in Season 4. He needs to take 4 lives to open 4 gates that will tear Hawkins apart. He gets Chrissy, Fred, and Patrick without much difficulty. But when it comes to Max, he gives her a curse that can be broken by music and happy memories, then monologues long enough for her friends to figure out how to save her. When she's trapped in his mind lair during the final battle, he doesn't end her life immediately. He talks about his philosophy, shows her Billy's death, and gives her just enough time for Eleven to intervene psychically from across the country. These aren't the actions of someone who's absolutely committed to winning. It's like he wants to lose. Or wants someone to stop him. They're the actions of someone who's conflicted or who's being forced to create opportunities for failure. What if Vecna doesn't actually want to merge the dimensions, but feels compelled to do it by whatever agreement he made with the Mind Flayer? What if part of him, the part that's still Henry Creel underneath all the corruption, is subconsciously sabotaging his own plans because he knows what he's doing is wrong? That would explain the theatrical presentation, the unnecessary talking, the specific targeting that gives victims a chance to escape. He's following orders from something else while simultaneously leaving breadcrumbs for the party to stop him. And what does that mean? That the real villain isn't the monster everyone can see, it's the thing pulling strings from behind the scenes. But wait, because there's an uncomfortable truth about how Eleven actually defeated Vecna in Season 4. Vecna let Eleven banish him the first time in 1979. Rewatch the Rainbow Room Massacre scene, knowing what we know now about Vecna's power level. Henry effortlessly ended every other numbered child in that room, including kids who had their own psychic abilities. He broke their bodies with barely any effort, making it look easy. Then young Eleven confronts him, and suddenly there's a prolonged struggle where they're evenly matched psychically before she manages to banish him to the Upside Down. But here's the question fans are asking. If Henry was powerful enough to take everyone else's life instantly, why did Eleven pose such a challenge? Why? Didn't he just snap her neck like he did to the others? The theory suggests he let her win that fight because being banished to the Upside Down was exactly what he wanted, or what something else wanted him to do. Maybe the Mind Flayer had already made contact with him and convinced him that the Upside Down was where he needed to be. Maybe Brenner had installed psychological programming that activated during the fight. Either way, his defeat looks suspiciously convenient in retrospect. Too convenient to be genuine. If Vecna actually wanted to stay on Earth, he could have taken down Eleven before she banished him. But instead, he chose the scenic route into the void. Classic Hawkins decision-making. Instead, he ended up exactly where he needed to be to gain even more power and eventually return. That doesn't feel like losing. It feels like executing a plan. No? And if someone manipulated Vecna into wanting to go to the Upside Down, they're playing a much longer game. Literally. Will Byers' connection to the Upside Down predates his kidnapping? Fans notice something seriously strange when rewatching Season 1 with Season 4 context. Will seems unusually sensitive to the supernatural before he ever gets taken. He senses the Demogorgon before it appears. He draws pictures that seem almost precognitive. His mother Joyce mentions he's always been different, more sensitive than other kids, which sounds like the same language used to describe Henry Creel's childhood. What if Will was already connected to the Upside Down somehow, before that November night, already marked by whatever force is actually in charge of that dimension? When the Demogorgon grabbed him, it specifically chose Will out of all the possible targets in Hawkins that night. It didn't take Mike or Lucas or Dustin. It didn't take random adults. It waited for Will specifically and hunted him down like it had instructions. Then once he was in the Upside Down, he survived for a week in an environment that should have ended him in hours. He knew instinctively how to hide, how to avoid the monsters, how to communicate with his mother through the lights. That's not luck or cleverness, that's compatibility with that dimension, like part of him already understood how it worked. Will fit into the upside down a little too naturally for anyone's comfort, and if Will was always meant to be taken, then Vecna's entire arc might just be a distraction from the real plan. But perhaps the most overlooked clue comes from a character everyone thinks is gone. Dr. Brenner's obsession with the gate suggests he knew something everyone else didn't. Brenner spent decades running experiments that seemed designed to make contact with the upside down, long before any gate existed. He was looking for something specific through those tests on psychic children, searching for a particular frequency or consciousness. What if Brenner wasn't trying to open a random portal, but responding to something that had been calling to him? Some fans theorized Brenner was in contact with the Mind Flayer or another entity long before 11 made the connection in 1983. That's clever, but what if he was following instructions he received through dreams or visions, building an entire program around summoning something that promised him power and knowledge? And if Brenner was being manipulated by the real villain all along, then every experiment and step toward opening the gate was part of a plan he thought was his own. But it was all actually being orchestrated by something else. Vecna would just be another piece on that board, another pawn being moved into position by an intelligence that's been working toward this moment for decades or centuries. And if Brenner's supposed death in Season 4 is another fake-out, if he's still alive and still working toward whatever he was promised, then Season 5 might reveal he's been the human agent of something far worse than Vecna ever was. Which brings us to the craziest theory that ties everything together. The Upside Down is alive, and it's been farming humans for food. What if the Upside Down isn't just a dimension, but a living organism? Something cosmic and ancient that feeds on consciousness and emotion? The particles floating in the air aren't spores. They're digestive enzymes breaking down psychic energy. The vines are tendrils of a massive creature that spans an entire dimension. When people enter the Upside Down, they're not exploring another world. They're walking inside something's body. And that something has been trying to access Earth for centuries because our dimension is rich with the exact type of food it needs. Human suffering, trauma, fear, and pain. Vecna thinks he's in control, reshaping the dimension to serve his vision. But he's actually being digested slowly, his consciousness being absorbed and assimilated while he's given the illusion of power. And hold on, what if the Mind Flayer is the digestive system of this cosmic entity, breaking down everything that enters and converting it into usable energy? That's crazy, right? Every gate that opens, every person who gets taken, every monster that crosses over is the Upside Down, extending further into our reality, trying to envelope Earth the same way it's enveloped countless other dimensions across time. Vecna's just the latest in a long line of powerful beings who thought they conquered that place, when really, they were just being used as tools to open a door for something incomprehensibly larger. And if that's true, then ending Vecna won't stop anything, it'll just clear the way for the real invasion to begin. So, what if everything we've been watching is exactly what this cosmic entity wanted? Drop your theories in the comments about who or what is really in charge, because Season 5 might reveal that the villain we've been fighting is just the opening act.